You are listening to the Law Enforcement Pirate Radio Network. Radio Free Larry presiding.
You can run, but you can hide.
Radio Free Larry.
All right, here we are again, going over the predicate crimes and the overt acts of criminal shift and the deep state shadow government criminal enterprise that operates with them, and that includes psychological warfare and spycraft operations. So if you're being harassed in your community, that's who's running it, no matter who the face is. There might be 1% chance that they're not deep state. That's the world we live in. We live in a communist world, a criminal communist world that is authoritarian in nature and murders citizens for the enrichment of others, including foreign nationals and foreign spies. So I want to go over the Overt Act. Again, we'll go back to Wikipedia. Politically, I might not see eye to eye with the majority of Wikipedia political news articles, or should I say encyclopedia articles and news articles. I guess they cover news also. So are they a publisher? The terminology game being played by social media that they're publishing. They're not publishing. They're past publishing. It's something new. They can't go back to the idea that they're a publisher. New law needs to be created to control that machine and that monster of a machine. So again, Wikipedia information is no better or worse than any other encyclopedia, as long as it doesn't enter into the political genre. In criminal law, reading from the Wikipedia article, Overt Act. In criminal law in, an overt act is the one that can be clearly proved by evidence and from which criminal intent can be inferred, as opposed to a mere intention in the mind to commit a crime. We are now at the stage of overt acts in the impeachment hearings, as well as the predicate crimes to that impeachment hearing within that beginning period of time where the secret meetings were taking place. It doesn't matter if they said anything to anybody. They can engage in obvious visual hints and cues, and also spycraft communication is going on around the witnesses all day. And that could come straight out of NSA. Nobody cares in the government. Don't tell yourself that you're protected. Are there police officers that would individually protect you? Yes, of course. I was in the government. I still protect people today, including police officers. And that's what this is also. This is what would stop the killing of police officers if we would prosecute these deep state crimes. We would go back to the way it used to be. Less suicides and less murdering of police officers. But yet those are still deep state crimes. They merely increased. Now they don't operate in a shadow method solely or a covert method solely. Now they're overt about it because the hostile takeover is moving. And as I said, it's agitating people that would revolt against such a criminal government. Not saying that revolution is recommended, merely saying that I see. And I'm not a blind man in that sense when it comes to the good of the nation. My own life, I can't see very far. The deep state is constantly moving, and that includes demonic activity down in my life, not from afar. Such an act, even if innocent per se, can potentially be used as evidence against someone during a trial to show participation in a crime. For instance, the purchase of a ski match, which can conceal identity, is generally a legal act, but may be an overt act if it is purchased in the planning of a bank robbery. That is something that they used at FLETC. That's like the standard overt act example. FLETC being the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Glencoe, Brunswick, Georgia. The term is more particularly employed in cases of treason, which must be demonstrated by some overt or open act in some jurisdiction. The rule derives from the Treason Act of 1695, passed by the Parliament of England and adopted by the United States in Article 3, Section 3 of the United States Constitution, which provided that no person shall be convicted of treason unless on the testimony of two witnesses to the same overt act or on a confession in open court in Kramer versus United States. The Supreme Court ruled that every act, movement, deed, and word of the defendant charged to constitute treason must be supported by the testimony of two witnesses. Quite frankly, we have more than two witnesses that can support the treason of Criminal Schiff and his crew of deep state shadow government, criminal enterprise, psychological warfare, spycraft, and psychological torture operators. Psychological torture takes its toll, but is also incremental. At what level do they want to cause it to occur, and at what level can they cause it to occur? But it is going on. All of the above is going on today, destroying your nation for criminals in government and in the private sector. What they do is they find a corporation that they can use to engage in deep state activity. They move a few people in eventually into that corporation. However, they will make contact through official channels, CIA, FBI, etc. They will prop that corporation up and make it a monopoly. They're just psycho. They can't stop themselves. They'll even murder somebody that's thinking of creating a rival company or corporation. And that isn't just Amazon. That's also out here in your communities. Don't let them tell you that they're better than you, and that's why they drive a more expensive car or have a bigger house. Many of them are deep state murderers and anti-American communists, even if they claim to be conservatives. You have to understand, the Soviet Union in many ways was conservative, ultra-conservative. The Soviet Union was ultra-conservative. So don't let them tell you that you have to be a liberal to be a communist subversive. Vladimir Putin has never been a liberal in his life, but he's probably the biggest communist boss in the history of this world. So again, that's most likely where the beginnings of the deep state were and are, and that's the Soviet Union, China. People like Hansen were arrested because they were overtly in communication with those entities. The Soviets, the Chinese would send messages through their chain of communication to take out government employees, and the government employees such as Mueller, Comey, people in the CIA also. We have George Tenet, we have Woolsey, could be Gina Haspel today. We don't know who anybody is. They receive messages. We don't know who they are because the people that we gave all of the authority and the equipment to investigate it don't investigate it because they're part of it. So they get these messages from China to end people's lives. Quote unquote cancel culture. It's not really cancel culture whatsoever. It's not cancel culture whatsoever. It's deep state shadow government, criminal enterprise, extortion, racketeering, and organized crime, assassinations, unto death if possible. It's not unto death if necessary. It's unto death if possible. So once you get on that list of deep state shadow government criminal enterprise, they'll put you on all sorts of lists. Oh, we suspect this guy's dealing dope. We suspect this guy is running a prostitution ring. We suspect this guy over here is having sex with minors. We suspect this guy or gal over here is having sex with prostitutes, that type of thing. But yet what they're doing along with that is attempting to create that using trillion-dollar CIA technology that is not a higher calling to use against U.S. citizens for your personal business, your personal criminal business. Every last one of you is trying to will my tongue awry because of the subject matter that I'm speaking about. You're sitting in your NSA rooms. You're sitting in your EU psychological warfare rooms. You're sitting in your Chinese and Russian psychological warfare rooms, working together in demonic beast mind, attempting to destroy the United States of America because we are sitting here. We are sitting here ruining your plans of world domination and world extermination of the Jews that you want to call Juden today, irregardless of who they were or who they are today. And I say who they were because every single person was a different person before the deep state started their psychological warfare activity. Every single one of those people were a different person. They were altered by extreme psychological methods designed by Menglitz Nazi psychologists in the FBI, in the CIA, in the NSA, in the China intelligence agencies, in China, in Russia, in the Soviet Union. They contacted government employees in the 1990s, and they worked for those people. Because every time the shadow method would communicate, maybe even saying it was CIA, and it was in some cases, they would get promoted. They would get a cash award. They would get a new house. They would get somewhere in their life. These are the biggest pieces of garbage, and they entrench themselves in the FBI, and that's all they're letting stay. That's why Robin Gritz is on the outs. Don't let them tell you, ha, 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 that's how it goes. Ha, 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 God will damn this planet. God will damn every one of them. God will send them to hell, but I leave that judgment up to God. I leave that judgment up to God. But I'm telling you, based upon what I know and what I've seen, that is where they're going. And that is what is happening. They work for Chinese. Don't let them call that a higher calling. Don't let Schiff tell you that these are patriots. They have murdered U.S. citizens for decades upon decades upon decades, for Chinese, for Russians, for people in the EU, for Iranians, for whoever would come along. Even if they're aligned with President Trump today, if they wanted somebody murdered, Mueller, his people under him, George Tenet, his people under him, John Brennan, his people under him, United States Marshal Service, their people under him, the ones that were in the deep state, they would murder a U.S. citizen using psychological methods, which includes physical murder, which means they drive another person to kill their victim. It is the most heinous, psychotic, criminal, anti-American activity that has ever been engaged in this nation. And it includes directors of these god-darn federal, state, and local agencies. That's how they got there. The Chinese put them in. The Russians put them in. The UK put them in. The EU put them in. That's why they're there. That's why Schiff's there. That's why Pelosi's there. And yes, they're living a good life, aren't they? What the Bible tell you about living a good life, but living it unto Satan? No, they go to church every day because they own your church. The Chinese own your church. The Russians own your church. They trigger these deep state guys in Norman, Oklahoma, these deep state gals in Norman, Oklahoma, based upon some politic or money or whatever it is. Do the same in Moore, Oklahoma. Do the same in Oklahoma City. And they're working for Satan, owning your church, telling you that everybody else is the sinner because they're not the deep state. Picture perfect beast corruption. You sowed it and you're reaping it. But you complain about it every day because why? Because it's the Democrat. In some cases, yes. In some cases, it's your Republican congressman or senator. Only God knows because they won't do the investigation because they know where it leads. It leads to narcotics distribution in Mexico, paying a car dealer in Oklahoma for a $90,000 truck, paying a real estate agent in Moore, Oklahoma for $1 million home with a big commission. And power of the deep state to execute anybody that would doubt them within the community. Uninvestigatable. Above the law. You see, Pelosi's using terms that apply to them. She thinks she's above the law. Schiff thinks he's above the law. John McCain thought he was above the law while he murdered U.S. citizens using CIA, FBI, U.S. Marshal Service, criminal cartels paid on the payroll of the FBI to murder U.S. citizens, on the payroll of DHS to murder U.S. citizens. Officially, it says that they're providing information
or they're a bait person in an operation. In reality, they are the most heinous criminals, global criminals that you can ever imagine. Sex trafficking exists because of them. But they say they're out there investigating sex trafficking. They're managing it. They're not investigating it. They're not stopping it. They're managing it for their own criminal enterprise. It's just like any other criminal organization. You know what it's doing. It's getting rid of the competition. But in their case, they arrest them and pull them into court and prosecute them, then say, aren't we wonderful? We're protecting you. We can tell you who everybody is in the community because our psychologists know everybody, because Satan tells them who each person is going to be. Because Satan tells them who each person is going to be. And the CIA comes along and attempts to make them that for decades upon decades. This nation is cursed by God. Quit telling yourself that it's anything but that. Now it's the greatest nation on earth, but it's cursed by God for what you have all done to cause what you have caused in this nation and in the rest of the world. You are why people are being murdered on the street. You are why kids are being raped in the schoolroom. You are why FBI. You are why DHS. You are why CIA. You are UK. You are China. You are global terrorism. Well, praise God in all that you do. Praise God.
You are listening to the Law Enforcement Pirate Radio Network. Radio Free Larry presiding.
You can run, but you can't hide.